Boxes are simple. They are the basis of complex perspective. Simple doesn't mean easy. Those three axes take work to understand, but they pay off. Control 3 dimensions and you control depth on paper. Now, after all that complexity we developed in this course, getting to know how to invent forms and to position those forms within grids, truths of perspective, that's what we learned in part 1. And now, in this next set of lessons, we return more knowing to square one. Here we go. If you want to catch up, watch all 113 episodes in the Perspective course so far at proko.com/perspective. And get a special summer sale discount now until July 6th. We want to start simply. We can even see an object as complex as this train as a series of cylinders, but cylinders have complex curves that we'll best understand by reducing their curved forms to boxes and straight lines. Let's see how simply we can simplify form. A shoebox is simple and all right angles, but it isn't simple enough for our purpose. Here's why. This shoebox is proportionally complicated. Different height, width, and depth. The box has a lid. That means there are actually 2 different boxes, more than we need to begin. Let's use the simplest box in the world, the cube. Time for a story. An old man trying to teach perspective to his young student boldly stated that the cube was the simplest 3-dimensional form. A cube is the simplest 3-dimensional form.
Nonsense.
Huh?
How many planes does a cube have?
6.
How many planes does a sphere have?
1.
You do the math.
It seemed a compelling argument, but when put into practice, the sphere's single plane is a booger of a plane. It's curved, and curves are complex.
All right, you win. But a cube is made of squares, and triangles are simpler than squares.
The argument made perfect sense. A triangle has 3 sides, a square 4.
I win.
But the problem with triangles is that there are so many kinds. So the only really simple triangle is the equilateral. Equilateral. Which of course could be oriented like this, or upside down, or lined up on the right. And its divisions at 60 degrees can be a little confusing, but the biggest problem is drawing any triangle in perspective. By the time we fix it with the height line in the center, well, we needed a square, or at least a right angle, to get there.
I hate you.
And if we decide to make that triangle 3D, what is it? So the old man had a point.
The most conveniently simple 3-dimensional form is the cube. Anything simpler would have to be flat.
The simplest box. Let's go back over this. Boxes are made of right angles. Every line is at a right angle to each other line that it touches. No question. That's the right-angled box of any proportion. The cube is even simpler. Square all around. Every plane is a 1-by-1 plane, as simple a box as any can be. But simple in this case does not mean easy. Each plane exactly the same size and shape as each other plane? That's hard criteria. Think about that. High as it's wide, wide as it's deep. And here is the big reason why it's so tough. Squares, when they're tipped into space, do not appear square. The usual stuff, the acutes and obtuses, foreshortening. But this is the challenge. Just as we master the basic directions in space with 3 axes, we master control of proportions in space with foreshortened squares. They let us see how a proportion is more than or less than a square. But more than that, squares solve the problem of field of vision. They help us establish how dramatic we want depth to look. The difference between close and far. That will be in our premium lesson. Getting up close or far away with a square. Now here is the biggie for where we're going in this course. Constructing the most basic form in the world, the sphere, will come to us clearly by seeing the cube as its parent. How to master cubes. How to master cubes. How to master cubes, how to master cubes, how to master cubes. Here's how to master the cube. Study it. Draw from it over and over. Imprint it into your brain. There are a few ways to draw from the cube, or to not. The worst way to start is to fuss over one plane so long you forget that it's only one plane of the cube. Fussing with angles and planes means you may copy exactly without comprehending the reason for all of those angles and planes. If you start with planes, rough them in lightly and loosely, comparing the shapes and eyeballing angles. It's less about lines when we do it like this than it is about shapes first. And a side benefit is that this is a way to improve your perception of shapes if you draw them with conscious awareness, perhaps even speaking aloud your insightful and personal descriptions of every shape. You will not only be seeing like a painter and graphic designer sees shapes, you will be learning specific surprises of how squares turn into new shapes that aren't square. Remember the reason you're doing this: to study their various characteristics, foreshortened, but not to be perfect. Get in the habit of fearlessly, freely beginning a sketch and gradually honing precision. That is the way we avoid that self-conscious, stifling freak-out approach. If we get something down, we can look and respond with opinions, questioning, judging it lightly, not harshly, seeing this not as a product, but as a process. This is to see the whole cube as a thing and let the particulars like line directions come from that view of the whole cube. Even if you prefer to work another way, practice this way until it feels natural. Delaying your commitments by gently seeking line directions based on the principles you're learning here trains you to almost see the correct lines in advance. That's one way, a good way. Here's another. You can start with the line systems, X, Y, and Z. In fact, we'll make that a project next lesson, but it's going to take some extra work. When we put down one line, to make it a box, we have two more crucial lines to place. We can place them well or poorly. If we don't know the axes, the odds are in favor of poorly. We need these three lines. They give us a front corner. That helps us find other corners at varying angles. Right angles now become acutes or obtuses, whether we know them or name them as such or not. All of that based on the first three lines working the planes out from there. This way is harder than seeing the shapes, at least for beginners. It relies on the knowledge of where those lines go, which some of you know, but even if you don't know exactly where lines go or why, starting with front corner lines is one way to learn to draw cubes if it encourages questions about where those other lines go, prompts you to review our earlier lessons, and preps you with healthy curiosity to embrace our coming lessons, which get pretty advanced, but all go back to the I know line systems bragging rights. Here's another thing. It may help to construct within a circle. Cubes don't stray far from the ratio of circles. I start with blobs and then find my axes, seeking receding convergence. Receding convergence is good. Lines aim a way to unite like they should. Receding divergence is bad. Lines spread apart, which is sad. Boxes have parallel lines. When parallel lines go away from our face, they converge at a vanishing point. One of the most common errors in freehand perspective is lines that don't look like they go away as they go away. This is so common we've named it a dreadful name that should conjure up terrible feelings. Receding divergence. It's carelessness, really. We know how convergence works. Parallel lines go back in space to a point. Not like that.
No.
Like this.
Yes.
It takes conscious attention until it doesn't. Even if we don't place the point exactly, we aim for a point aware of receding convergence, drawing boxes and cubes and making sure lines don't diverge as they recede will get you into this practical habit forever. Forever? Forever. It isn't that difficult. You have your model. Copy it roughly. Remind yourself of the direction that every line goes. Say it out loud if that helps. Off to the left, off to the right. Up, down, away. Your assignment? 100 rough cubes with arrows. Draw 100 rough cubes, but take extra time to include little arrows. Send every line to some point in the distance where it meets the others. Aim lines away to converge. If you're wondering, shouldn't I put in a vanishing point? One thing at a time here. We're trying to nurture a habit in freehand. That's why 100 done quickly, or at least not too slowly. And don't use a ruler. That would be wrong. Aiming at vanishing points is important when that is our aim. But this is to rehearse awareness of general convergence so that from now on when you draw, you'll know that if one line goes off to a point in the distance, parallel lines will all go to the same place. You'll know this. Regarding your model, you can build one, or buy one, or use the free cube in our Zolly app. No better option for moving your view of it all around, hither, thither, and yon. Convergence gets obvious in wide-angle views, but it happens as well in a cropped, distant view. Barely. And even if it doesn't, pretend like it does. Practice receding convergence with every line until you can feel it recede as you draw. It might even help to add ever so slight atmospheric perspective. Or not. But arrows, at least. Next episode, you'll learn to aim lines at vanishing points more accurately. The secret is in knowing horizons, even when they are not horizontal. See you next lesson, or in premium. Right now you can get 20% off the full course at proko.com/perspective. On sale until July 6th.